What up friends, today we're talking about the A7S3, some features that nobody's talking about, things I love, things I hate, and who this camera is good for. Let's get into it. The thing I think Sony's overall doing extremely well at, especially with this model, is listening to their customer. They're improving on the previous generation and listening to what the issues are and what our wish lists were coming from the past. And Sony has done a great job with that. I'm gonna get into some of those changes right now. So something not many people are talking about that I think is a huge game changer for the A7S3 is the ability to now shoot simultaneously to dual card slots and back up your video files in body. This is a huge feature. I think it's so key for those that are like me or predominantly wedding shooters. But if you're a corporate shooter or you're a live event shooter, the ability to back up your footage in body is just incredible. I think it's a huge asset and something that sets this apart. Right now, Canon R5 and R6 can't do that. They're shooting to one card slot only, just as Sony has done it in the past. And that really sets this on a new level. The A7S3 now has dual CF Express Type A card slots, as well as dual UHS-2 card slots for SD. So what that means is now you have a little bit of future proofing in this new technology of CF Express Type A. But what I love that Sony's done, and something that Canon is not doing right now, is that you're not required to use CF Express Type A cards to get the highest quality codecs, frame rates, and bit rates for this camera. So you can get really high quality, you can get the best video possible while still using SD cards. That's something I love because you're not beholden to the CF Express Type A cards, especially right now with new technology. They're still really expensive. And for 90% of the people out there, you don't need those cards. You don't need the speed, the read-write speeds that come with that. And SD cards are still a very good option. Now, that being said, one of the flaws that this camera does have is that, and it's not really a flaw of the camera, it's kind of just technology in general. But in order to use the highest codecs and the highest bit rates that this camera offers, especially in 120 frames per second 4K, you will need some very fast SD cards, V90 rated cards, which are still expensive currently. I can get away with V60 cards for 90% of the features that this thing offers, but if I will still want the full video features, you will need those V90 cards. Talking more on video features, this now has the ability to shoot 10-bit H.264 and H.265, which is a newer codec, 10-bit 422 internal. That's a lot of geeky nerd talk for really high quality video with a lot of information going to those cards to work with in post. Just a beautiful job. You'll see that across all reviews right now. 24 frames per second, 60 frames per second, even 120 frames per second. The video is buttery smooth, really good dynamic range, and just a lot of information. What Sony did that I think is really key here is they focused on quality instead of future proofing. So they really didn't go for the 8K, 6K, even oversampling 5K. They went for really high quality 4K video. And right now, I think that's an argument that's being made that that's the right path to go. Right now, 4K is really good, and a lot of computers and monitors and a lot of the sources for editing, they handle 4K and they don't handle 6K and 8K really well. Now, is that the right path for the future? That's an argument for you guys. I don't know if that's the right path to take, but right now I'm really happy with the quality 4K. Now, as opposed to the other side of things, when you look at Canon, they're really focusing on pushing the 6K and 8K envelope and not so much as the quality 4K that the A7S3 is clearly winning at right now. In the latest firmware update, Sony released the S-Cinetone profile in the A7S3, and I think that's something that's really great now because if you are shooting in the higher end cinema cameras, you can now use the same S-Cinetone, get your color corrections the same, and that makes the A7S3 a very viable option as the perfect B camera. Another feature I absolutely love is the ability to shoot 16-bit raw external coming out of this camera, out of the full-size HDMI port, and you could shoot limitless 16-bit raw up to 60 frames per second limitless. Now that's a really nice feature. For those of you that are willing to tether and willing to set up external recording, that 16-bit 60 frames per second is a really high quality file coming out of this. And to shoot limitless is really nice, especially if you're shooting, live performances, speakers, events where you don't want to have to cut the footage and take another shot. You could just shoot all the way through. All right, I want to talk about something else that I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about. So the port layout for the A7S3, you have a full-size HDMI port, you have a USB-C port and a micro HDMI port. What that port layout gives you is the ability to shoot tethered while charging simultaneously, something that the R5 and R6 cannot also do. And that's because the R5 and R6 only have a micro HDMI port and a USB-C port. That really sets this camera out because now you're not beholden to power, you're not beholden to external memory, and you're not beholden to, overheating. So you can get really high quality files coming out of this limitless for however long you need. I really like the sensor in this. It's a new backside illuminated design that's supposed to be 3 times faster readout speeds. But what I love about it most is that Sony claims that it has 15 stops of dynamic range. Now, in shooting this with stills and videos, I've seen an absolutely beautiful dynamic range that I really, really like. Would I say it's 15 stops? No, typically that means, real world, it's probably like 13 stops or 12 stops. But either way, I really like the data that you're getting out of this. You can really do a lot in post. Also, touching on internals, it's got the new Bion Z XR processor. That's supposed to be 8 times faster than its predecessor. I don't know if that really means comparable to the A7S2, which is like 6 years old now, or if that's comparable to like an A7R3. But either way, it's a very fast and very efficient processor. Of course, pushing data out with some of these high codecs at 120 frames per second, 4K, you would need a beefy processor to do that. So that's what that new processor delivers. Another topic I want to talk about is overheating. And I've done extensive tests with this. I will preface this by saying I'm in Southern California, and a lot of times I'm shooting outdoors by the beach. So it doesn't get extremely hot here, especially in the last couple winter months. So take that for what you will. I think it's geographically based on where you are. If you're in the dead heat of Texas in the summer, you're probably gonna get a lot of more issues with this. But here are my test results. So in shooting 4K, 24 and 30 frames per second, I got absolutely no overheating. In fact, my battery died before I can hit any type of overheating levels. The battery died at 2 hours and 40 minutes, so nothing there. In shooting 4K 60, again, my battery died at around 2 hours and I got absolutely no overheating. In shooting 4K 120, interestingly, unlike some of the other reviews that I've seen, I did get some overheating. I got that overheating around the 45-minute mark. I shut it down for about a minute or two, popped it back on, and got about another 15 minutes before my battery died. So I did get some overheating at that 4K 120 mark. Will I ever be shooting 45 minutes straight 4K 120? Absolutely not. And in fact, my memory cards, several of them wouldn't even fill that much footage. But I will say there was some overheating, so it's not the overall perfect camera, and just like Canon, you do have that issue lingering in the background. Now, the Canon R5 and R6 obviously overheat a lot more than this Sony. Now, I have heard with firmware updates, those camera did improve. The alternative to overheating is really getting lesser quality, lower resolution, or having some type of internal cooling. And I don't want a fan. That unwanted noise really hinders my style of shooting, and so I would prefer to have no fans and just deal with the overheating, whether that means shooting in shorter clips or shutting the camera down for a little bit. That's just me personally. Moving in the future, we'll probably see, like the FX3, more internal cooling situations, but then you are gonna have to deal with audio interference, and that's just something I'm not willing to do for my style of shoot. For you guys out there, I would say really take a look at what it is you're shooting. Do you really need extended shoot times, and are you gonna be shooting in 4K 120 that much? For a majority of the people, I would say absolutely not. Even if you're doing commercial work, you're not shooting 4K 120 that much for that long of clips, but that's up to you to decide. That's what I found in my results. Low light performance, I did see a noticeable increase, especially when looking at my A7 III, A7R3. The low light performance in this thing, it's a beast, and that's mainly because of the 12 megapixel sensor. The bigger the sensor pixels, the more light that it can collect and the better low light performance. That also is a hindrance later on when we're talking about photos, but right now in comparison to the A7S2, I'll say it wasn't an exponential increase in low light performance. I really thought the A7S2 was a beast of a low light camera, and this is still very, very good. I just was expecting a lot more, especially over the time and technology that we've increased, but it is better. It just isn't way, way better like I was expecting. Now, talking about some of the cons, and this camera definitely isn't perfect. It does have some flaws still. Number one, in 4K, you still do have a crop. Now, it's a 1.1 times crop, so it's negligible, but it still does bother me for some reason. That's in 4K 120. In 4K 60, there's no crop, and of course, in 4K 24 or whatever else, there's no crop. Another con I saw with this camera is it does still have rolling shutter, and it's freaking annoying because in the past, rolling shutter has always been an issue with Sony cameras for video. But for the price that I paid for this thing, I wouldn't want there to be any rolling shutter, and there still is an issue. It's slight, it's minute, but it still bothers my eye, and I do notice it. Another big flaw that I found in this may just be technology not advanced enough to accommodate this, but in S-Log3, which I actually like shooting in for Sony, you still have a base ISO of 640. So that's a big hindrance for me. It reduces image quality. It's an annoyance and a flaw. Now, it's significantly better in the past. The A7S2 had a base ISO of 1600 in S-Log3, and the A7 III has a base ISO of 800 in S-Log3, making it essentially unusable. At ISO 640, I guess it's usable. I still probably won't use it. You can expand that down to ISO 80, but then of course you lose even more image quality. So I just won't do it. I'll shoot in other log profiles, but that's something that really bugs me still. I hope it's fixed in future firmware updates or in future tech advancement. Another topic of conversation that you should really think about are the file sizes. When shooting 6K and 8K and even these 4K 120 frames, you know, even when you have highly efficient codecs like the H.265 codec, you're still having huge, massive files bogging down your workflow. Your memory is going to need to be bigger. Your external hard drives are going to need to be bigger. Your computer, your GPU and CPU are going to need to be able to handle those files. Even my custom built computer struggled with that. And I just built that computer not more than a year ago. And shooting Adobe Premiere Pro, you know, the timelines were really glitchy. They were struggling. They were slow. I actually had to upgrade to an M1 Mac and flip over to Final Cut Pro to accommodate these files. All that being said is you really need to think about what camera you're buying, what you're going to be shooting, and if you're able to handle those file sizes and how you're going to be able to handle those file sizes. Some new features and design features that Sony made to the camera that I absolutely love. Number one, they put the photo and video tabs on the top spin dial right next to each other, so it's just easy to switch between the two. Before, they were on opposite sides of the dial, and it was just kind of a nuisance if you were trying to switch in a hurry. Additionally, they now have 3 slots for custom file settings, so I love that because now I can have a video settings set up for regular video shooting, a slow motion setup, and then also have a photography setup, and I can switch between the 3 very quickly and easily. I love that they moved the record button right next to the shutter button on the top of the camera, and then switched that custom button onto the back so you don't lose any custom buttons. If you're coming from older Sony cameras, the biggest upgrade for you is going to be the new menu system. Ooh. It is just such a pleasant surprise and something long overdue from Sony, but they did a really great job. The user interface is now flawless. I will say it's just really, really clean, easy to find things, and quick. It's just nice. They've also expanded the touch screen features to include the menu. So you can now touch between menu, toggle points, change menu settings, where you couldn't do that in the past. The touchscreen was mainly for shooting only, but now you can do everything. The addition of the fully articulating screen is just really nice, but I love that you can swivel it around and close the screen to protect that when you're not using it. This camera is also fully weather sealed, so if you have a weather sealed lens, you could just get out there and shoot in any situation and not have to worry about that. They also have now interestingly included HEIF files, Heif Files as I call them, but I don't know if everybody calls them that. In addition to JPEG, you could now shoot on these Heif files, and they're theoretically supposed to have greater dynamic range, greater low light performance, and just overall better quality than JPEG files. Canon has also adopted these files now, so I'm hoping to see more integration and software support, because right now the software support is not there, so I would say don't shoot in those files yet. But kind of future proofing, and I'm hoping down the line we see more support now that the big names have adopted those files. I shot in them a little bit and I do like them. They are interesting. I do see an increase in quality over shooting JPEG. And I think for those people that are content creators and they want to shoot quickly and then export right to your smartphone and post right away, I could see the value of having these files in these cameras. It's a nice thing to have, but overall for most of you guys, I would say still shoot RAW or shoot RAW plus JPEG. That's just still your best option, and you have the most information in post to do whatever it is you want. In terms of autofocus, I really honestly had a 100% hit rate. I had no misses. And this sensor has a 92% coverage of phase and contrast detect autofocus points. So you really don't miss anything. Real-time eye tracking is just a joy to work with. In the past, I've always shot manual focus for video because it was just more accurate and it's what we always did. We didn't have that autofocus hunting and we didn't want to have to worry about missing your autofocus points. But with the new cameras from Sony and camera, they have such good focus tracking and it's just superb. So I'm now shooting more and more in autofocus, and even when I'm on a gimbal sometimes, if I'm shooting people, the real-time eye the real-time eye tracking just doesn't miss. So it's something that you don't have to worry about anymore, and it just does a really, really good job. Now, the biggest flaw with this camera is obviously the 12 megapixel stills, and that's a conversation to really be had on what your shooting style is. So if you're debating buying this camera over a Canon or some of the other Sony lineup, I would say these are the things to think about. As a hybrid camera shooter, this is mainly a video camera and a stills camera secondary. And really, if you want to be shooting stills and this is going to be your #1 main camera, think about what it is you do with your still pictures. Do you print your photos? Do you deliver them to clients? Are you doing commercial work? Do you need to crop in all the time because you don't frame up, as tight as you normally would like? If those are answers to yes, then you might not want this camera as your main shooter because 12 megapixels isn't going to be enough. For me, 60–80% of my shooting is really delivered digitally. I'm shooting for social media, I'm shooting for social media clients and content creators, or I'm shooting commercial work strictly for their website or internal use, in which case 12 megapixels is absolutely fine. And actually it's really nice because I like the dynamic range and low light performance in these files. But if I'm gonna be shooting for clients that really need to blow up or print their photos in large format settings, then 12 megapixels isn't going to do the job. And for my personal projects, sometimes I do shoot, and blow up and print in 9x13, which it could still do well, but that's kind of the breaking point. Anything bigger than that, I'm going to want more resolution. I am so pleased that technology is advancing so quickly, where just not too long ago, to get the video capabilities and the photo capabilities that this was having, you were spending $50,000, $100,000 on a red camera that was the size of this table. And now to be able to get that in such a small package, which a relatively small, low entry cost, has really opened the doors to single cinematographers and run and gun shooters and student films, and to be able to shoot your short films and commercial work to almost everybody. Really, the door is open, and it's not really about the gear anymore or how much money you have or what your budget is for gear. It's now about the skill and what you can do with the gear. If you're willing to put in the hard work and be creative, you can shoot commercial work and short films that are award-winning and just as amazing as some of the giant production companies with unlimited budgets. We now can do everything they can do, and I love that. So with that, I leave it to you guys. Do you love this camera? Do you hate it? Or is it the perfect camera for all the video and modern day social media use? Leave me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you're shooting and if you are picking up an A7S3. If I brought you some value, please hit me with a like and subscribe for more awesome videos out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.